Arizona Territory, 1879. The ground was dry as bone and the sky burned white overhead when Forresta Vale was dragged by her hair into the center of the mining town of Hollow Creek. "She cursed my baby," the woman shrieked. Her voice cracked with grief and fury, pointing a trembling finger at Forresta. Born blue. Never cried. Forresta's lip was split open. Her long dark hair clung to her face, soaked in sweat and blood. She did not speak. She never did when they demanded she defend herself. It never mattered. They called her a witch, a devil's daughter, a curse. Yesterday, she had helped birth that baby with clean hands and a calm voice. The mother was in labor 3 days, and Forresta had done what she could. The child had never breathed. And just like always, they blamed her. A man raised a rock. Another loaded his rifle. "Let her be." A deep voice broke through the heat and noise. The crowd turned as one. At the edge of the circle stood a tall cowboy, dust-covered and sun-worn, with 2 children beside him. A boy of about 8 clutched his hand. A girl, maybe 6, stood behind his leg, her golden hair tangled to her shoulders. The cowboy stepped forward. "I said, let her be." His voice was calm, but it carried. He wore no badge, but there was something in his eyes hard and steady that made men think twice. The man with the rifle lowered it. The woman who had screamed fell to her knees, sobbing. With slow steps, the cowboy walked up to Forresta. Her lip bled freely now. She swayed on her feet, but did not fall. His eyes met hers, dark green meeting storm gray. "You got a name?" he asked. "Forresta Vale." He nodded once, then looked around at the crowd. "She comes with me. Anyone touches her, they answer to me." Understand. They did not speak, but they stepped back. He took her arm gently, pulled it over his shoulder. "You can walk." "I can." "Good. I'm Wade Merrick." "That's Nathaniel and Nora." The boy gave a small wave. The girl hid her face again. They walked out of Hollow Creek with the sun burning at their backs. Wade's ranch sat 10 miles outside town, nestled in a dry valley where mesquite trees grew stubborn through red earth. The house was small but solid. A porch wrapped around the front, and 2 goats dozed in the shade. He helped her inside, sat her down, and brought a wet cloth for her lip. "Why did you do that?" Forresta asked. "Because they were wrong. That has never stopped anyone before." He sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. "I need someone to help with the children. My wife died last winter. Fever took her in 2 days. I've been trying, but I cannot do both jobs." Forresta blinked. "You want me to raise your children? You have a gentle way. I saw it in town. You kept quiet. You did not strike back. You did not curse them, even when they cursed you." She looked toward the door. "Sooner or later, word will reach here. I do not care what they say. My children need someone kind, someone who listens. People believe I bring death. They believed the same thing about my wife once. Because her mother was Mexican, and her hands smelled like sage. I do not care what they believe." Forresta looked out the window. The valley stretched wide and silent. She had never belonged anywhere. Not in the town her mother died in. Not in the Navajo camps that turned her away for having a white father. "All right. I will stay." By the end of the week, Nora was brushing Forresta's hair, and Nathaniel had asked her to teach him how to track rabbit prints in the dust. She cooked without being asked, braided Nora's hair before bedtime, and listened to Nathaniel's endless questions with patience Wade did not possess. Wade spent his days in the fields, mending fences and checking cattle. But each time he came in, he watched Forresta with a quiet look, like he was memorizing the way she moved through the house. One evening, she found him on the porch after sunset, sharpening his knife by lantern light. "She is smiling again," Forresta said, sitting beside him. He knew she meant Nora. "I have not seen her smile since her mama died," he said. They sat in silence for a while. "You could have left me there," she said. "I could have. Why did you not?" He looked over at her. The lantern cast her face in amber light. "Because the moment I saw you, I knew the stories were lies. And because I saw the way you looked at that child, even when her mother screamed at you." He paused. "And maybe because I have not known peace in a long time. Until you came into my house." She looked down at her hands. "They will not stop, Wade. The stories. The stares. I will not stop either," he said. His hand brushed hers. She did not pull away. A month passed. Then another. Nora began calling Forresta Mama by accident. Nathaniel stopped correcting her. Forresta woke early each morning and made cornbread, and Wade sat at the table with coffee, watching her like she was a sunrise he never thought he would see again. One night, a knock came at the door. 3 men stood outside. The same ones who had raised their guns in Hollow Creek. "She belongs to the devil," one of them said. "You are bringing her into your home, raising your children with her. She will kill them, same as the baby she cursed." Wade stepped outside and shut the door behind him. "You come here again, and you do not walk away from it," he said. They left. Forresta stood on the other side of the door, hand pressed to her chest. That night, when he came back in, she looked at him for a long time. "You are not afraid?" she asked. "I was once," he said, "when I lost my wife. When I thought I could not raise them alone." His voice dropped. "But I am not afraid when you are here." She stepped forward, slowly, carefully. Then her hand touched his chest, fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. "I never thought I would be safe," she whispered. He took her hand in his and kissed her knuckles. "You are safe now, and you are not a curse. You are the best thing that has happened to this house since the day Nora was born." He leaned in. She met him halfway. The kiss was soft, real, like standing still after running for too long. When they pulled apart, her eyes were glassy with tears. "I want to stay," she said. "Then stay," he whispered. "Raise them with me. Be my family." She nodded, and under the quiet stars, she knew she had been saved. Not from the world, but from the belief she did not deserve love. Wade had taken her in, and with him, she had found something she never thought she would home. The wind stirred low across the canyon floor, carrying with it the scent of creosote and warm dust. Wade adjusted the straps on the mule's pack while Forresta tied a bundle of herbs to dry beneath the porch eaves. She'd gathered them from the low hills near the wash, where wild sage grew in the shelter of rocks. "Nathaniel thinks there's a bobcat nesting near the west fence," Wade said as he straightened. "Found tracks too small for cougar, but too spaced for a fox." Forresta wiped her hands on her apron. "I can look with him." Wade studied her a moment, then gave a quiet nod. "He'd like that." Nora came running from the side shed, cheeks flushed, one of her braids half undone. "Papa, there's a noise in the chicken yard." Wade handed Forresta the reins. "I'll check it." Once he'd gone, Nora leaned close. "Do you think it's something with teeth?" Forresta crouched to her height. "Maybe, but your father's got long arms and a quick step. Nothing with teeth wants to meet him." Nora looked pleased with that and held still while Forresta fixed the loose braid, fingers gentle and sure. "What kind of mama were you before us?" Nora asked, eyes wide. "I wasn't one yet," Forresta said softly, "but I always hoped I would be." Nora tilted her head, considering. "Were you lonely?" "I was." "You're not now?" Forresta tied off the braid and kissed the crown of her head. "Not anymore." Later, while the sun mellowed to copper over the ridge, Forresta walked the perimeter with Nathaniel. He pointed out faint paw prints in the silt near the fence post. "See? It goes this way, then stops. I think it jumped." She crouched beside him, studying the spacing. "You're right. It leapt from there to the other side of the fence. Smart to notice. I've been watching since the goats started acting strange." He glanced up. "Papa says you're smart about tracks." "More than him." She smiled, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I've spent years learning what animals mean by where they step. Some people speak with their mouths. Some creatures speak with their feet." He nodded solemnly. "You could teach me." "I will." That night, while the children slept curled together in the loft, Forresta stood at the basin, washing the day's dust from her arms. Wade came in from the barn, shirt collar damp with sweat. "Goats all accounted for," he said, setting down his gloves. She poured water from the pitcher, drying her hands on the linen cloth beside the stove. Nora asked if I'd been a mother before. Wade leaned against the doorframe. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." He crossed the room, stopping beside her. "I've been thinking about what comes next." Her breath caught. "For us. For this house. For the children. For the land." He met her eyes. "And for you and me." She held his gaze. "I want to make it right. Not just kind. Not just easier than before. I want to give us something lasting. If you'll have it." She reached up and touched the edge of his jaw, rough from a day without shaving. "I never thought I'd be asked. I'm asking now." Her voice was low but steady. "Then yes." He took her hand, pressing it against his chest. There was no rush in the room. just the crackle of the stove and the slow breath between them. Outside, the wind shifted again, softer now. The weight of the past had not vanished, but it no longer pressed down. It stood behind them, unmoving, as they faced forward. In the morning, Wade would ride into town for a license and return before supper. He would bring back a new set of boots for Nathaniel and a ribbon for Nora's hair. And Forresta would begin sewing her dress from the bolt of calico she had kept wrapped in muslin for years, waiting for a day that now had a name. They had been strangers once. Now they were home. Forresta's fingers were stained with berry juice as she laid strips of pastry across the pie tin. The crust was uneven, but she didn't mind. Nora stood on a stool nearby, watching intently and handing her each strip like it was gold. "Do you think Papa will notice if it's crooked?" "He'll notice it tastes good," Forresta replied, smoothing the edge with a thumb. Nora giggled and wiped her hands on the hem of her dress. Outside, Wade's boots scraped the porch boards. He stepped in, carrying a folded paper and the smell of horse sweat and sun-dried leather. "They filed it without fuss," he said, setting the paper on the table. "Judge said we could sign in 2 weeks, same as anyone." Forresta nodded once and turned back to the pie. "There's a woman in town who does sewing work," Wade went on. "Told her we'd need her hands for a few days. I know you've got your own cloth, but she's quick with a needle and won't ask questions. I can finish it myself," she said, brushing flour from her wrists. "But I'll let her help with the hem." He crossed the room and unwrapped a small parcel from his coat. "Pick this up too." Inside lay a brass hair comb, simple but finely made, with a row of pressed flowers etched along the curve. Forresta stared at it, then at him. "I've never owned anything like this." "You should have," he said, taking her hand and placing it in her palm. She didn't speak, but she set the comb on the shelf above the hearth where it caught the light. That night, Wade didn't sleep. He lay quiet beside the open window, listening to the night sounds: crickets, a restless owl, the drip of water from the tin pail outside. Sometime near dawn, he rose without waking Forresta and walked out to the barn. The air was cool, still holding traces of night. He saddled the bay mare and rode out toward the western ridge. He'd been meaning to check the spring-fed trough that fed the cattle pen, and now seemed as good a time as any. The water line was lower than it should have been. He crouched beside it, rubbing his jaw. Behind him, the sound of hoofbeats made him stand. Nathaniel rode up bareback on the dun pony, reins loose in his hands. "I saw you go," the boy said. "You should be sleeping. I figured if you were going somewhere, it might be important." Wade looked at the boy's face steady, sun-darkened, too knowing for his age. "You're thinking like a man more than a boy." Nathaniel shrugged. "You said I had to learn." Wade glanced up at the sky, where dawn was just beginning to color the clouds. "I didn't mean today." Nathaniel swung down and crouched beside the trough. "Water's low." "I saw. Could be that crack on the north side again." Wade gave a quiet grunt. "You remember where we patched it last spring? Near the bent post. I marked it with a cross." Wade looked at him. "You did that on your own?" Nathaniel nodded. Wade put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Let's go see it then." By the time they returned, Forresta was in the garden, sleeves rolled, coaxing weeds from between the beans. Nora sat under the cottonwood tree with her doll, humming softly. Wade tied off the horses and walked over to Forresta. Her hands were dirt-smudged, her braid loose from the wind. "You'll wear yourself out before breakfast," he said. "I've been up longer than you." He raised an eyebrow. "That's so." She turned, and her smile was small but sure. Nathaniel left a note on the table. "Said he went with you." "Boy's got your patience," Wade said. "He's got your caution." They stood there a moment, neither speaking, the sun warming the ground beneath their feet. "I've been thinking," she said after a while, her voice low, "about the planting. If we dig a channel from the back of the trough, we could water more than just the bean rows." He nodded slowly. "Might take us some days. I'll start tomorrow. You won't be doing it alone." She glanced toward the house. "Nora wants to help with the wedding pie. Says she'll pick the berries herself. She's stubborn. She gets that from you." Wade laughed, quiet and full. "God help me." By late afternoon, Forresta sat on the porch steps, comb in her hair now, catching gold light as she peeled apples for drying. Wade was sanding a length of pine for the new cradle he'd decided to build, just in case they ever needed one. He didn't say much, just worked in steady strokes, glancing over at her every now and then. "You lived alone before this," he said after a while. "You still miss it?" She shook her head. "I remember it, but I don't miss it. I worry," he said, pausing his sanding, "that I've asked too much of you." She looked up at him, eyes clear. "You asked me to be loved," she said. "That's not too much." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. The goats were humming quietly in their pen, and the smell of sage drifted on the breeze. Wade put down the board and came to sit beside her. His hand found hers. They didn't speak again that evening. There was no need. The quiet between them was full, and for the first time in either of their lives, the silence held nothing but peace. The morning of the wedding brought a pale hush to the sky, the kind of soft gray that promised rain if the wind turned just so. Forresta stood near the hearth, pulling at the sleeves of her cotton dress, the one she and the town seamstress had finished just 2 days before. The fabric held the faint scent of rosewater and pine smoke, and the hem brushed her ankles neatly. Nora sat on the floor braiding a string of wildflowers with the care of someone handling spun glass. Nathaniel had gone out with Wade at first light to check the cattle farther north, but he'd promised to be home by midday. Forresta turned toward the table. A small tin box sat unopened beside the folded license. She ran her fingers over its edge once, then let them rest. "You gonna wear your hair up?" Nora asked without looking up. "I hadn't decided." "You should. Papa says it's prettier that way." Forresta tilted her head. "He said that. He told the horse he thought so." Nora shrugged. "I was brushing her, and he didn't know I was listening." Forresta smiled, faint and fleeting, then reached for the comb Wade had given her. She twisted her hair up, hands steady. By the time the wagon rolled into sight, the clouds had drifted east, and the sun cast long strokes of gold across the valley. Nathaniel jumped down first, face flushed from the ride, and ran to open the gate. Wade followed, dusting off his vest. He carried a wrapped bundle in one arm and a quiet confidence in his step. "You all right?" he asked as he reached her. "I am." He looked at the dress, then at her face, and didn't speak for several breaths. "What?" she asked. "You look like something I'd never dare wish for, but got anyway." She took the bundle from his hands and unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a shawl deep blue with stitched borders, small beads sewn into the pattern like scattered stars. "It was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to my wife when we married. I think she'd want you to have it now." Forresta didn't speak. She folded the fabric once, then slipped it over her shoulders. It was warm from the sun. The ceremony was held beneath the cottonwood tree, where Nora had tied her flower chain between 2 low branches. The judge arrived on horseback, boots muddy from a flooded creek crossing. He wiped his brow with a kerchief and nodded to Wade with the ease of a man used to long rides and short speeches. The words were simple, promises made without fanfare. Wade's hand didn't tremble when he took hers, and Forresta's voice didn't falter when she spoke back. When it was done, Nathaniel handed Wade a tin cup of cider and said, "You've got to say something now. That's what folks do." Wade glanced at Forresta. "I will." He turned to the children first. "You've both carried more weight than you should have. You lost your mother, and I didn't know if I'd be enough for you. I'm still learning, but I chose someone brave and steady to help me, and I'll never let her stand alone." He looked at Forresta again. "They called you a curse. They said you brought bad luck. But everything good that's happened since you came into this house, that's you. You made this place quiet again. You made it full." Forresta rested her hand on his chest, not to silence him, but to hold the moment still. Later, after the judge had gone and the children had fallen asleep by the hearth, Wade sat beside her on the porch steps. The shawl draped across her shoulders, and her bare feet touched the cool boards. "I found an old ledger in the barn," he said, "from when my father kept accounts. There's notes in the back about a spring farther west. It's marked, but I've never seen it." She turned toward him. "You think it could be useful?" "Might be. If we clear the bramble and dig out the basin, we could run a second line to the lower field. Maybe plant squash come fall." "I'll go with you," she said, "when the children are in school." He nodded, then reached down and took her hand. The skin at her knuckles was rough, but her grip was warm. "I keep thinking about the first time I saw you," he said. "You wouldn't look at anyone. You stood so still, like something waiting to be struck." "I was." "You're not anymore." "No," she said, "not anymore." The moon rose pale over the ridge, casting a silver sheen across the yard. Somewhere out near the fence, a night bird called once, then fell silent again. Wade leaned back against the porch post, Forresta's hand still in his, and let the quiet settle around them. It wasn't the silence of grief or fear or one, it was the silence that came when there was nothing left to prove. And for Forresta Vale, once called a curse, it was the sound of belonging. The summer deepened slowly, the air thick with heat that clung to skin and softened the earth. By late August, the lower field had been cleared in full, and Forresta stood waist-deep in the tall grass, cutting back the last of the wild rye with a sickle Wade had sharpened the night before. Her arms ached by the time the sun hit its midpoint, but she kept at it until the clearing opened wide enough to see the line where the new water channel would reach if the spring held. Wade came down from the north fence near midday, a coil of rope looped over his shoulder, walking with the slow gait he used when thinking through a problem. He didn't speak until he'd taken the blade from her hand and set it aside. "You'll wear yourself to the bone," he said, not unkindly. "I wanted to finish this patch before the ground dries again." "You did. Come sit." They made their way to the cottonwood at the edge of the field, where Wade had left a jug of water and a cloth-wrapped packet of biscuits. Forresta drank deeply before handing it back. "The spring's still giving?" she asked. "Barely, but I think if we dig deeper by the rock shelf, we'll catch more of the runoff. The bed's narrow, but the water's cold." She nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. "If we can hold it through September, we'll have enough for planting come first frost." Wade broke a biscuit in two, handing her the larger half. "You always think 3 steps ahead." "I had to. Before." He watched her quietly for a moment, then said, "You don't have to anymore." "Not alone." "I know." They sat there a while without speaking, the breeze stirring the grass in slow waves. From the house, the distant sound of Nora's singing drifted down, thin and sweet. The next morning, Wade hitched the wagon and they all rode into town, first time as a family. Nathaniel wore his cleanest shirt, the one Forresta had sewn new buttons onto after he tore it on a nail. Nora carried a basket of dried pears wrapped in cloth, meant for the schoolteacher. The town's mood shifted when they arrived. Where once there had been narrowed eyes and whispers, now there was nods, wary but civil. Forresta didn't look down. They stopped at the mercantile first for salt and flour, then at the smith's to pick up a repaired hinge for the barn door. At the mill, Wade spoke with a man about trading a portion of their next corn haul for winter oats. Forresta waited near the wagon, watching as Nora practiced skipping stones in the dusty lot. A woman approached her, tall and thin, with weathered cheeks and a sunbonnet drawn low over her brows. "I heard you took in Wade Merrick's children," the woman said. "I married him," Forresta replied, even in calm. The woman studied her for a long moment. "You helped my sister when her youngest was born. She said you knew how to ease the pain better than the midwife ever did." Forresta didn't respond. "My sister's due again in October. She asked if I'd find you." Forresta nodded once. "I'll come." The woman hesitated, then held out a small pouch of dried mint. "For your tea." She said it helps the breath when the heat's too thick. Forresta took it. "Thank you." When they returned home, Nathaniel ran ahead to check the spring. Wade helped unload the wagon while Forresta stored the flour in the back pantry. She lingered there a while after, running her fingers over the shelf edges, grounding herself in the quiet. That evening, Wade found her behind the house, standing beneath the juniper tree where the goats sometimes slept. She held the mint pouch in her palm, rubbing the edge between 2 fingers. "You all right?" he asked. "I didn't know if I'd ever be seen as anything but what they called me." "You're not," he said. "Not here. Not anymore." She looked at him, the last light of day turning her eyes almost silver. "It's strange. I never imagined a life where I could be still. You made this one." She stepped closer. "Not alone." He touched her cheek. "I want to build the rest of it with you. The field, the spring, whatever comes." "I want that too," she whispered. He kissed her then, slow and certain, like someone who'd waited long enough to know not to rush it. Her hands found his waist, and they stood there until the stars began to gather. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch together, her head rested against his shoulder, his thumb tracing slow circles over the back of her hand. The wind was soft, carrying the smell of sweetgrass and something faintly floral maybe the last of the wild primrose blooming near the fence. Wade tilted his head toward her. You ever think we'd get here? She smiled without looking up. No, but now that we have, I don't plan on leaving it behind. Good. Because I already promised the children we'd plant apple trees next spring. You're getting ahead again. Guess I'm learning from you. She laughed, low and warm, and leaned into him fully. The house behind them was quiet. The land ahead was theirs. There was nothing left to fear and nothing left to prove. They had built something that would last. Together.